end, if you care about the environment, if you care about global poverty, if you're opposed to cruelty to animals, any one of these things, it is unethical to eat animals, and vegetarianism is a moral imperative. Thank you.
First, I'd like to thank Bruce and the Banana Slugs for Animals group for organizing this. Just real quick, how many people in here are vegetarians already?
Vegan.
Wow. So, you're right. Well, first, I'd like to address the idea that eating meat is contributing to global poverty, and that the fact that a large majority of our food is being fed to livestock drives up the cost of grain, and that excludes people from the market being able to buy grain. Now, economically, this is sort of like, it's not true, first of all. Second of all, the global poor is disproportionately living in developing countries that are agrarian societies. Traditionally, these countries rely on agriculture as their sole means of climbing into the mainstream economy. So to suggest that shipping our unused food or our food that we would be feeding to livestock would help these people is incorrect. It's sort of the equivalent of giving someone a fish instead of teaching them to fish. You need to allow these economies to develop so that they can grow and rise out of poverty instead of just creating a system reliant upon aid. Now, as far as 20 calories going into producing 1 calorie of output as far for food, I can't verify or refute that claim, but I can state that animal products contain much higher proportions of proteins, minerals, and vitamins than vegetable products do. For example, a cod, 30 grams of cod, 30 grams of protein will come from 90 calories of fish. Now that's a third of a gram of protein per calorie, whereas your typical soy-based meat substitute product, which is fortified with additional protein, only comes up to about 0.1, actually 0.09 grams of protein per calorie. This doesn't only limit itself to protein, but also applies to other nutrients, such as, well, iron. Iron can be found in decent concentrations in vegetables. However, the way that our body processes iron is predisposed towards digesting iron that comes from animal. The term is heme iron. I believe it has to do with hemoglobin. I'm not a biologist. So due to this, the dietary recommendations for vegetarian diets is that you actually eat 1.8 times the amount of iron that is recommended to omnivores, to meat eaters as well. Now, all these statistics, by the way, come from Livestrong.com from a dietitian named Michelle Torquette. I mean, I think if Lance Armstrong trusts her, then we can as well. One key nutrient that is a lot harder to get from vegetables than from meat is B12. Now, when you're growing up, you build up a store of B12 in your liver that, if not supplemented, will last for 3 to 5 years. So I think it's very relevant that you grew up eating meat and playing football in Oklahoma, because that allows you to build up these stores which continue to allow you to lead a healthy life. So for those reasons, it's clearly not a simple 20 calorie to 1 calorie trade-off. It's a lot more complicated than that. Essentially what I'm trying to do here is just convince you that the only legitimate reason that you should be a vegetarian or vegan is the animal rights perspective on it. Now, Thank you. That's oh, and as far as these, yeah, no, actually, that's all I have.
So now I'm up, right?
Yep, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Tom. I guess I'll take each of these in turn. First, on the issue of global poverty, the point that Francis Moore Lepay makes is that, in fact, throughout the famine in Ethiopia, Ethiopia was exporting linseed and soy to Europe to feed the chickens and other farmed animals. In the early 1990s, when Somalia was going through a famine, throughout that famine, Somalia, again, was exporting soy and linseed to Europe to feed the farmed animals. The same sort of relationship exists today between people who are in poverty in Central and South America and farmed animals in the United States and in Canada. The reason Greenpeace created that massive banner and unveiled it in the Amazon rainforest is we are very much not chopping down the Amazon rainforest in order to create sustainable agriculture for the indigenous people who are living there. We're chopping down the rainforest in order to graze animals and to grow food, to feed that food to farmed animals. So literally every single agricultural economist who has looked at this agrees that the growing demand for meat and the growing demand for biofuels are two causes of escalating food costs, which are pricing out people who literally have nothing to eat. So Gandhi said probably 20 of the most profound things that were ever said. One of the things he said was, think of the face of the poorest person you've ever met and ask yourself if the action you contemplate will be of use to that person. I like that as a concept. Think of the face of the poorest person you've ever met and ask yourself if the action you contemplate will be of use to that person. It is really unarguably true that right now in the global marketplace, where we can grow stuff in the developing world, ship it to the developed world to feed it to farmed animals, that is becoming easier and easier and more true, as indicated in a World Bank report that was looking specifically at biofuels, but that applies 10 times greater to farmed animals, that what World Watch says here is true. The meat production is an inefficient use of grain. The grain is used more efficiently when consumed directly by humans. Continued growth in meat output is dependent on feeding grain to animals, creating competition for grain between affluent meat eaters and the world's poor. If you're opposed to global poverty, don't make it worse by eating something so vastly inefficient as chicken, pork, and other meat products. On the environmental issue, I'll talk about the health thing in just a second. He basically just skirted the environmental thing and started talking about protein and B12 and iron. It is true that environmentally speaking, the worst thing that any of us as individuals are doing is eating animal products. It takes 20 times the resources of something else, and according to Livestock's Long Shadow, a report from the United Nations, more than 400 pages long, eating animals is one of the most significant contributors to the most serious environmental problems at every scale from local to global. Every environmental problem you want to look at, the meat industry is one of the top 2 or 3 causes. It contributes to problems of land degradation, climate change and air pollution, water shortage and water pollution, and loss of biodiversity. On climate change, the issue that is the hot topic in the environmental community, raising animals for food creates about 18% of all global warming gases internationally, which is about 40% more than all cars, trains, planes, all forms of transport combined. Which is why Al Gore's Global Warming Survival Handbook says the single greatest thing any individual can do to decrease their global warming footprint is to cut out animal products, to stop eating meat. If you care about the environment, if you care about the global poor, the only acceptable diet is a vegetarian diet. The reality is that other animals are more like us than they're unlike us. As Darwin says, other animals like humans manifestly feel pleasure and pain. They feel happiness, they feel misery. The foremost Darwin scholar living today, a guy named Richard Dawkins, calls other species our cousins, our evolutionary cousins, and challenges us to transcend what he calls speciesist bigotry, the idea that human beings are the center of the